The engine of a classic Norton Commando 961 growled softly as Keanu Reeves pulled up to the gates of his secluded, high-end condominium at sunset. Dressed in an unassuming jacket and jeans, he swung a leg over his motorcycle and removed his helmet, revealing the face recognized by millions. Yet as he approached the entrance, he was met with something unexpected: resistance. The security guard, standing rigid in a perfectly pressed uniform, eyed him with suspicion. His expression was sharp, calculating. This wasn't just routine protocol. This was scrutiny. Good evening. Do you live here? The guard asked, his tone laced with skepticism. I don't believe I've seen you before. Keanu, ever composed, offered a polite nod. I recently moved in. My name is Keanu Reeves. A flicker of recognition crossed the guard's face, but just as quickly, doubt clouded his features. He looked Keanu up and down, then cast a skeptical glance at the motorcycle. It wasn't the flashy sports car he expected a resident here to drive. A Keanu Reeves? The guard's voice carried an edge of disbelief. Can you prove it? You don't exactly look like someone who lives here. Silence settled between them. A test. A challenge. Keanu, unfazed, nodded slowly. I have my purchase documents and lease agreement in my bag. I can show them if necessary. The guard crossed his arms, unmoved. I can't let you in without confirmation in the system. And frankly, no one mentioned that you'd be moving in. His stance tightened, his grip on authority firm. A few yards away, condo staff exchanged curious glances. A passing resident paused, sensing the friction in the air. Keanu inhaled deeply, suppressing any frustration. He wasn't above security measures, but something about the guard's tone made it clear. This wasn't just about protocol. You understand you're just doing your job, Keanu said evenly, his voice steady. But I assure you, I live here. I can wait while you confirm. But the guard still didn't budge. He eyed Keanu again, doubt still thick in his gaze. You sure you're in the right place? His voice took on a patronizing lilt. This condominium isn't exactly for ordinary people. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Keanu let them settle, then exhaled slowly, his gaze unwavering. Don't worry, he said, his voice cool as steel. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The guard hesitated, caught off guard by the quiet confidence in Keanu's tone. The tension in the air thickened. Somewhere beyond the towering ivy-covered walls, someone peered from a window, drawn in by the scene unfolding below. And then came the moment that shifted everything. Call whoever you need, Keanu said, voice firm but calm. I'll wait right here. The guard narrowed his eyes, clearly unprepared for such a response. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't arrogance. This was something else entirely. An unshakable presence, a man who had nothing to prove but everything to stand for. And the night was just beginning. Before we continue with this unexpected turn of events, tell us, have you ever faced a moment where you had to prove who you were? Let us know in the comments. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, smash the like button, and leave a comment below. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Though the situation was demanding more than he was willing to give, the security guard cast another glance at Keanu's motorcycle, his expression barely masking his skepticism. The way he eyed the bike wasn't just about security protocol. It was judgmental, dismissive. All right, maybe you've got some documents, the guard said, his voice laced with doubt. But I'd need to confirm with management before letting anyone in. And honestly, this doesn't really seem like the kind of place someone like you would frequent. Keanu, accustomed to warmth and respect in most interactions, immediately recognized the prejudice behind those words. He took a slow, steady breath, keeping his composure intact. His patience was not infinite, but he wouldn't let himself be provoked. I know you're just doing your job, he said, voice even, but there may be an issue with the system. If you could contact the administration, I'd be happy to wait. The guard raised an eyebrow and let out a short, incredulous laugh. You seem awfully calm for someone trying to get into a place that, let's be honest, doesn't really fit. He paused, then added the words with deliberate weight, someone like you. Oh. Keanu remained silent for a beat, studying the man. He could feel the layers behind that phrase. Someone like you. What did that even mean? His fame? His choice of vehicle? His casual demeanor? Confronting the guard outright wouldn't help. Instead, he replied with a simple, confident statement. I trust that you'll do the right thing. The guard narrowed his eyes, seemingly irritated by Keanu's unshakable calm. He grabbed the radio clip to his belt and pressed the button. The central main gate. We've got a man here claiming to be the new resident of apartment 502. Name, Keanu Reeves. Can you check the system? Keanu watched as the guard waited for a response, his stance rigid. Whatever the reply was, Keanu couldn't hear it, but the flicker of hesitation in the guard's expression made it clear. It wasn't what he'd expected. Just as I thought, the guard muttered, lowering the radio and crossing his arms again. There's no record of anyone with that name. He exhaled sharply and shook his head. Maybe you should double-check the address before insisting. Keanu's grip on his helmet tightened, but his face betrayed no irritation. There's no mistake. This is the correct address. Perhaps the system hasn't been updated yet. It happens. The guard scoffed. Yeah, it happens. But I've worked here for years, and I've never seen anyone arrive unregistered, especially in a place like this. You get what I mean? There it was again, that veiled implication. Keanu slightly tilted his head, suppressing the frustration rising within him. Well, I understand that you have protocols to follow, he said, his voice measured, but I've already given you the apartment number. I have the documents to prove it. Isn't that enough? The guard deliberated for a moment, then shifted his stance and nodded toward the motorcycle. Look, all I'm saying is that things here are different. The people who live in this condominium, they don't show up on bikes like that. Maybe you're used to a different kind of place. Keanu inhaled slowly, recognizing the deep-rooted bias in the statement. Instead of reacting, he reached for his bag, pulled out a folder, and handed it over. Here are the apartment documents. Perhaps this will clear things up. The guard took the papers with evident reluctance, flipping through them as if expecting to find something amiss. His expression remained skeptical. These papers might be legit, he admitted, but I'm not the one who makes the final decision here. And to be honest, I can't just take someone's word for it. It's a matter of security, you know. He lifted his radio again. I'll call the administrator, but just so you know, it might take a while. Keanu nodded. He knew that arguing wouldn't get him anywhere. As the guard made the call, the evening air grew cooler. Keanu glanced at the darkening sky, his patience unwavering, even as irritation simmered beneath the surface. This was more than just a security check. He knew that now. After a few moments, the guard lowered the radio with a slight frown. Administrator's busy right now, but I'll wait for a response. So, until then, you'll have to stay here. I can't let you in without confirmation. Keanu studied the guard, recognizing that this had long stopped being about policy. The man's judgment clouded his professionalism, and Keanu could see it. But instead of pushing back, he simply responded with quiet certainty. That's fine, he said. I'll wait. The silence between them thickened. The guard shifted uncomfortably, clearly expecting Keanu to break, to snap, to get frustrated, to give him a reason to escalate the situation. But Keanu didn't. He remained still, his patience both disarming and unnerving. The guard exhaled sharply and, with an almost provocative smirk, said, Wait as long as you want. I'm not the one who'll be opening the gate for you. He thought that would be the end of it. He thought Keanu would give up, walk away, retreat. But what happened next would change the course of the night entirely, officer. The officer took the folder, flipping through the documents with a scrutinizing eye. His partner leaned in slightly, glancing at the pages. The silence stretched as they reviewed the paperwork, the security guard shifting restlessly from foot to foot, his earlier smugness fading into something more uncertain. The lead officer finally looked up, his gaze shifting between Keanu and the guard. These documents appear legitimate, he said, his tone neutral but firm. He turned to his partner, who nodded in agreement. "Mr. Reeves," the officer continued, handing back the papers, "I don't see any immediate issue here. If you say you're a resident and your documents back that up, we can verify this with the building's management." The security guard let out a sharp breath. "Come on, officer. You can't seriously be buying this," he scoffed. "A lot of things look legitimate until you dig deeper. I say we escort him out until we can confirm properly." The officer's eyes hardened slightly. "And I say we do our job thoroughly before jumping to conclusions," he countered. Keanu remained silent, watching as the power dynamic subtly shifted. The guard, now visibly uncomfortable, seemed to realize that his unwavering stance might be crumbling. "I can call the building management right now," Keanu offered, pulling out his phone. "They can confirm my residency immediately." The officer nodded. "Go ahead." Keanu dialed, and after a few rings, a voice on the other end answered. "Yes, this is Keanu Reeves. I'm at the main gate, and there seems to be an issue with my name not being in the system. Could you confirm my residency for the officers here?" The speaker on the other end hesitated for only a moment before responding, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Yes, of course, Mr. Reeves is indeed a resident of apartment 52. There must have been an error with the system. Please let him in immediately." The guard's face paled slightly as the officer turned to him with a pointed look. "Seems like we've got our answer," the officer stated. The guard opened his mouth as if to argue, but quickly closed it, swallowing his pride. Keanu tucked his phone away, his expression unreadable. "So are we done here?" The officer nodded. "Yes, Mr. Reeves. You're free to enter. Sorry for the inconvenience." The security guard stiffened, but finally stepped aside, pressing the button that unlocked the gate. The heavy metal barriers slid open, revealing the pristine drive leading to the condominium's grand entrance. Keanu met the guard's gaze for a brief moment. There was no triumph in his expression, just quiet understanding. Then, without another word, he mounted his motorcycle, revved the engine, and rode through the gate, disappearing into the dimly lit driveway beyond. The officer turned back to the security guard, who now looked anything but victorious. "I'd suggest being a little more careful about who you assume belongs here," the officer said, his voice carrying an edge. "Because tonight, you just made a mistake that could cost you." As the officers returned to their vehicle, the guard stood there staring after the retreating taillight of Keanu's motorcycle, his jaw tight. Inside the condominium, Keanu parked his bike and took a deep breath before heading toward his home. It was just another night in Hollywood, a city where appearances were often deceiving and where even the most familiar faces could be treated like strangers. If you found this story intriguing, make sure to hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories. You won't want to miss what we have coming next. Rocket-Fire Keanu studied the administrator for a moment before replying, his voice calm but resolute. "What happened here tonight shouldn't happen to anyone, famous or not. You need to ensure that this doesn't happen to anyone else who comes through these gates. Wait." "Nor," the administrator nodded solemnly. "You're absolutely right, Mr. Reeves. I assure you that we will be conducting a full review of security procedures. This type of treatment is unacceptable, and we will take the necessary steps to prevent it from happening again." The security guard swallowed hard, the weight of the moment finally sinking in. His earlier confidence had completely eroded, replaced by something that looked dangerously close to panic. He had assumed authority over the situation, only to be reminded in the most humiliating way possible that he had made a serious misjudgment. Keanu, ever the picture of grace, let out a slow breath. "Good. Then let's move forward." The administrator gestured toward the open gate. "Please, Mr. Reeves, let me personally escort you to your apartment. We want to make sure you get settled in without any further issues." Keanu gave a small nod, then turned to the officers. "Thank you for your time." "I appreciate your fairness." The lead officer gave a short nod of respect. "No problem, Mr. Reeves, just doing our job. And for what it's worth, I think you handled this situation better than most would have." The second officer gave the security guard a lingering look before turning back to Keanu. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Keanu offered a polite smile, then mounted his motorcycle, revving the engine. As he rolled past the security booth, he cast a final glance at the guard, who now looked like he wanted to disappear. But Keanu didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The lesson had already been delivered. Inside the complex, the administrator walked beside Keanu as he guided his motorcycle toward his designated parking space. "Again, I can't express how sorry I am for all this," the administrator said, shaking his head. "I'll personally see to it that changes are made." Keanu gave a small, knowing smile. "I hope so. Not everyone has the patience to wait for the truth to come out." With that, he parked his bike, removed his helmet, and took in his surroundings. The night had been long, but he had finally arrived at his new home. And though the confrontation at the gate was behind him, it served as a stark reminder that even in a world where he was widely recognized, there were still places where he could be reduced to just another stranger, facing judgment. As the administrator walked away, Keanu exhaled deeply and moved toward his apartment. It was time to settle in. The city of Hollywood was full of contradictions, and tonight he had just lived through another one. As the meeting concluded, a hushed murmur filled the hall. The weight of Keanu's words lingered in the air, leaving many in deep thought. Some exchanged glances, others nodded in silent agreement, while a few seemed visibly affected by the lesson that had just unfolded before them. The administrator, still standing beside Keanu, took a moment to collect himself before addressing the attendees once more. "Discrimination, whether intentional or not, has no place in our community. We will be implementing new training for our security and staff to ensure this never happens again. And that starts now." He turned his gaze toward the security guard, who had barely lifted his head since the meeting began. "You and I will be having a more in-depth discussion about your actions tonight. But understand this. This is your chance to change. What happened today should be a lesson, not just a punishment." The guard, visibly humbled, gave a slow nod. He still looked uncomfortable, but seemed to realize the gravity of his mistake. As the residents began to disperse, Keanu took a deep breath, finally allowing himself a moment of solitude amidst the echoes of his own words. He hadn't intended to become the center of attention tonight, nor did he expect to become a catalyst for change within this community. But fate had different plans. As he stepped toward the exit, a few residents cautiously approached him. One, a middle-aged woman with a warm but hesitant smile, offered a simple "thank you for speaking up." Another, a young man in a suit who looked like he belonged to the world the guard had so desperately tried to defend, gave Keanu an apologetic nod. "I saw what happened at the gate. That was unacceptable. I'm sorry you had to go through that." Keanu gave them both a small, appreciative nod but didn't linger. His mind was already elsewhere, longing for the quiet refuge of his new home. He walked out into the cool night air, his body moving on autopilot toward the parking garage where his motorcycle sat. He paused beside it, running a gloved hand over the handlebars before letting out a deep sigh. He wasn't angry, not anymore. He was simply exhausted. Tonight had been a stark reminder of how much work there was still left to do in the world. But at least here in this small pocket of life, a change had begun. A short time later, Keanu finally made it to his apartment. The door clicked shut behind him, locking away the outside world. Muchos. He placed his helmet on the counter, kicked off his boots, and let the silence envelop him. It had been a long night, but in the end, maybe it had been worth it. As he sat down on the couch, stretching out his legs and allowing his body to finally relax, he glanced out the window at the shimmering city lights below. He wasn't sure if the security guard had truly learned his lesson, or if the changes the administrator promised would really take root. But one thing was certain: tonight, a conversation had started, and sometimes that was enough to spark something bigger. Whoa.